Good morning, everyone. I thought we could go over the practice ACT that you took this past Friday through a video. And in that way, I can talk to all of you, and you can watch it at the pace you need to go over and get all the answers to the questions you need. We'll be doing some in-class assignments based on this, and based on you watching this and writing up how to do certain problems over the next 2 weeks. Let's start with problem number 1. Carmen is playing with blocks. She arranges the stacks of blocks so that each successive level of blocks has one fewer than the level before. Top block has 1 block. Such a stack is 3 levels shown below. Carmen wants to make a stack that's 12 levels. How many blocks would she need to build this stack? Well, if I start by making a table, I notice that if we have level and total blocks, first level, 1 block. Second level, well, there's 1 block in the first level and 2 more in the second level, so that's a total of 3. The third would be the 3 we've already got plus 3 more in the third level, so that would be 3 plus 3 or 6. And the fourth level has 4 more blocks, so we're going to add 4 to that number and get 10. The fifth level has another 5 blocks to add to this 10, and so 15. And we could write a formula for this, but it's not that much work to get down to 12 just by adding values. This turns out to be the sum of an arithmetic sequence. So if we were comfortable with our sequences knowledge, we could use that, or we could just continue this table 9, 10, 11, 12. So adding 6 to 15 is 21, adding 7 to 21 is 28, adding 8 to 28 is 36, adding 9 to 36 is 45, adding 10 to 45 is 55, adding 11 to 55 is 66, adding 12 to 66 is 78. So that's choice B, 78 blocks. 2. To keep up with rising expenses, a motel manager needs to raise the $40 room rate by 22%. What will the new rate be? Well, 22% of 40 is the additional fee plus the $40 fee for the room. We could factor a 40 out here and get 0.22 plus 1, or 1.22 times 40. When I multiply these two together, I get 4880, or choice J. 3. A salesperson, your commission is directly proportional to the dollar amount sales you make. So commission is proportional to sales. And we're going to have to find that constant of proportionality. If your sales are 800, your commission is 112. 112 equals K times 800. Divide both sides by 800 to get a value of K. I'm not really interested in simplifying this number. I know that it says how much would your commission earn if you had $1,400 in sales. So commission equals 112 over 800 times $1,400 in sales. So I'm taking that 1,400 and plugging it back into our direct variation, our direct proportionality statement. And remember, I got that from reading the first sentence. Your commission is directly proportional to your sales. Commission is proportional to your sales. when I multiply the commission of 1400 times our constant of proportionality 112 over 800, I've got some canceling here. I could even take this further, 7, 4. And when I finish simplifying, I end up with $196 in commission, and so choice B for number 3. Choice B for number 3. Okay, let's take a look at 4. 4. 7 plus 3x equals 22. And they want to know what 2x is equal to. Well, let's solve this equation for x. So we get x equals 5. 2x, therefore, is 2 times x, or 2 times 5, which is 10. So I get choice G for number 4. 5. Total cost of renting a car is $30 a day, plus 28.5 cents for each mile. What's the total for renting for 5 days and driving 350 miles? Okay, so 5 days times $30 a day plus 28 cents a mile, 28.5 cents a mile, times 350 miles. That's the expression I'm going to use, and then when I pull out my calculator and multiply, I get 150 plus this number, and the total then is 249.75, which is my choice C is my answer there. This is, and maybe you want to think about this as $30 per day and 28.5 cents per mile, because then you could see, well, I need to multiply that by 5 days, and I need to multiply that by 350 miles. So you could see that you could cancel those days and miles and add those totals together. 6, which is always true about ABC and BCD. Well, they tell us that we have this parallelogram. A, B, C, D. And there are a whole lot of properties we should recall from geometry about parallelograms. First of all, opposite sides are congruent, but they're also parallel. So these are parallel and they are congruent. But I know that opposite angles are equal, and because I know that these lines are parallel, I can also prove that these angles, these consecutive angles, are supplementary. I notice here they're asking about ABC, that's this angle, and BCD, that's this angle, and lo and behold, those are supplementary. They add up to 180. So F for number 6. 7. Let's take a look at 7. 7 says, what is the least common denominator for adding the fractions 4 over 15 plus 1 over 12 plus 3 over 8? Well, there's a 3 and a 5 here. There's a 2, a 2, and a 3 here. And there's a 2, a 2, a 2 here. Well, we're going to need all these 2's. This one has 2 of them, so this one would need one more 2. And this one needs a whole bunch of 2's. We need a 5, because this one has a 5. Even though these others don't have a 5, because this one has a 5, we need a 5. And I see these 3's, 1 in each of them, so my common denominator will need a 3, we'll need a 5, and we'll need these 3 2's. 2 times 2 times 2 is not 6, it's 8. 2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 2 is 8. So my common denominator then would be 120, and that's choice B. Okay, let's take a look at 8. 8 says I'm multiplying 2x to the 4th y times 3x to the 5th y to the 8th. Well, in multiplying, 2 times 3 is going to be 6, but multiplying when the bases are the same and we have these exponents is a little different. Remember, when the bases are the same and we're multiplying, we add the exponents. So 4 plus 5 gives me x to the 9th. 1 plus 8 gives me y to the 9th. And that is choice H. Choice H for number 8. Number 9. It costs $A for an adult ticket to a reggae concert and S dollars for a student ticket. The difference between the costs of 12 adult tickets and 18 student tickets is 36. Well, 18 student tickets and 12 adult tickets is 36. But I don't know that the 12 adult tickets cost more than the 18. What I know is that the difference should be $36 between the stack of money that's the biggest and the stack of money that is the smallest. And so maybe I'm looking at 18s minus 12a equals 36. And because I've got these two possibilities, absolute value allows me to write the statement as, well, let's take the absolute value of the difference between these two numbers. 18s equals 36, and that's choice C. Choice C. 10. Which has the least value? Well, I noticed here that I needed to be able to take the square root of a number. So I went with a number that I could take the square root of, x equals 4, just to test these out with. And so I looked at my choices and said the square root of 4, that would be choice F, is 2. And then the square root of 2 times 4, well, that's the square root of 8. And I might not know what that is, but I know that that's bigger than the square root of 4. So that can't be the least value, though 2 root 2 is approximately 2.82. The square root of x times x is the square root, in our case, of 16, or 4. That's not smaller than 2. We've got x root x, which is 4 times square root of 4, or 4 times 2 for 8. And then finally we have x times x, which is 4 times 4, or 16. So it looks like choice F is the least value for number 10. Number 11. Charles defined a new operation, diamond, such that when we have A, comma, B, diamond, C, comma, D, we would write AC plus BD, AB minus CD. Okay, so it looks like this number times this number plus this number times this number on top, and on the bottom, this number times this number minus this number times this number. And then they give us the ordered pairs 2, 1, diamond, and then 3, 4. So let's follow that pattern again. This one times this one, 2 times 3, plus this one times this one, 1 times 4, over this one times this one, 2 times 1, minus this one times this one, 3 times 4. So I get 6 plus 4 is 10 on top, and then 2 minus 12, or negative 10 on the bottom, which is negative 1, and that's choice B for number 11. Number 12. In the figure below, angle BAC is 30 degrees. So here's BAC, and there's a point D over here, is 30 degrees. ABC measures 110 degrees. So we've used up 140 degrees, which means there's 40 left for this one. And since these are a linear pair, we know these two should add up to 180. So the measure of angle ACD plus this 40-degree angle should add up to 180. If we subtract 40 from both sides, we get the measure of angle ACD is 140 degrees. And that's choice G. G for number 12. We also had a theorem in geometry said that the exterior angle equals the sum of the two remote interior angles. And so we could have seen that 30 plus 110 is 140 and gotten our answer that way, but my experience is that most students don't remember the exterior angle theorem. 13. 13, we've got this isosceles right triangle. Now they tell me here that this is 10 and that there's a right angle, but remember they said isosceles right triangle, which means that this side also has to be 10. Why can't this be 10? Well, that's the hypotenuse. It's got to be longer than the legs, and we know it's the hypotenuse because it's across from the right angle. So I'm looking for that third side. What's its length in feet? And, you know, if I'm comfortable with my 45, 90 right triangle shortcuts where I multiply the leg by root 2 to get the hypotenuse, I could be done pretty quick. If I'm not, I can always use the Pythagorean theorem and say 10 squared plus 10 squared, that's a squared plus b squared equals c squared, our hypotenuse. So we get 100 plus 100 equals h squared, 200 equals h squared, and when we take the square root of both sides, I get the square root of 200. Well, that's 2 times 100. I know the square root of 100 is 10. No one for the 2 to pair up with, so 10 root 2 is the hypotenuse. Okay, 14. 14 says, bag of 400 jelly beans, 25% are red. You randomly pick a jelly bean. What is the probability that it is not red? Well, if I take the probability of red away from 100%, that's 1 minus 0.25, I get 0.75, or 3/4. That's the probability of not red. Probability of not red. So that's choice H for number 14. 15. What polynomial must be added to x squared plus, minus x squared minus 2x plus 6 plus what polynomial equals 3x squared plus 7x? Well, I think the way to solve for question mark is to get rid of all this other stuff, so I'm going to subtract x squared from both sides. And I'm going to add 2x to both sides. And I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides. And so I'm going to get the unknown polynomial is 3x squared minus 1x squared is 2x squared. 7x plus 2x is 9x. and 0 minus 6 is negative 6. And this is choice D. Choice D for number 15. Let's take a look at 16. What is the slope of the line parallel to the line? 8x plus 9y equals 3. Okay, so I remember that from slope-intercept form, I can read the slope of the line, but that means that y is all by itself. So let's solve this equation for y, first by subtracting 8x from each side. If I subtract 8x from each side, I get 9y equals negative 8x plus 3. And then, to get y by itself, I see there's this 9 attached to the y with multiplication. So let's divide by 9. Dink. Y equals negative 8/9 x plus 1/3. Well, here's the slope, negative 8/9, and we should remember that the slopes of parallel lines are the same, and so the slope of the parallel line here would be negative 8/9, which is choice G. Choice G for number 16. 17. Seventeen says, in a standard xy coordinate plane, a line segment has endpoints at 3, 6, and 9, 4. 3, 6, 9, 4. What are the coordinates of the midpoint of that segment? Well, we've talked about the midpoint formula a couple of times in our morning class, and we know that the midpoint formula is the average of the x's, so 3 plus 9 divided by 2, and the average of the y's, 6 plus 4 divided by 2. So that's going to give me 12 over 2 and 10 over 2, which is 6, 5. The midpoint is located at 6, 5. Okay, well, let's confirm that. So if I go from 3 to 6 on the x's, that meant the x's had to go up by 3. To go from the middle out to the other end, I need to add 3 more. 6 plus 3 gives me 9. Oh, good. And to go from 6 on this endpoint to 5 at the middle, I had to go down 1. So to go from the y value in the middle to the y value at the end, I should go down 1, and sure enough I do. So this is my midpoint, and it corresponds with choice D. 18. Y equals x squared. What is negative y? Well, to get negative y, I'm going to have to take y equals x squared and multiply that expression by negative 1. So here I'm going to have negative y. Now, this negative is not inside this squaring. Remember, according to PEMDAS, multiplying by negative 1 happens after the exponents. So I have negative 1 times x squared, or negative x squared. That's why my answer here is G. G for number 18. Number 19. The function h of x equals 4x squared minus 5x. What is the value of h of negative 3? Well, notice how the x is gone and negative 3 is in its place, which means over here I'm going to have to get rid of these x's and put negative 3 in their place. 4 times negative 3 squared minus 5 times negative 3. Notice now the negative is inside the parentheses for squaring. So this is going to be negative 3 times negative 3, which is positive 9. And then here we have negative 5 times negative 3 plus 15. So we get 36 plus 15, or 51, and that's choice D. D for 19. 20. We've got a triangle where side xz is longer than yz. I think I need to label this x, z, y. xz is longer than yz. So we know that this segment length is longer than this segment length. Which of the following statements are true? The measure of angle x is always less than the measure of angle y. Well, hopefully we remember our triangle inequality theorem that says across from the smallest angle is the smallest side, and across from the smallest side is the smallest angle. Or we could read it as across from the biggest side is the biggest angle. So what's the angle across from xz? Well, here's xz, and the angle that's across from it is angle y. And here's yz. This is yz. Across from it is angle x. So across from the bigger side is the bigger angle, right? Because this side is bigger than that one. This angle must be bigger than that one. Angle y is bigger than angle x, and that's choice F. F for number 20. #21. We've got absolute value 7 times -3 plus 2 times 4. Well, 7 times -3 is -21, and 2 times 4 is 8. -21 plus 8 is -13. And then the absolute value of -13 is 13. And that's choice C for number 21. 22. 22 says x is greater than absolute y, and we know that y equals -4. So I plug my -4 in there. X is greater than the absolute value of -4. Okay, so the absolute value of -4 is 4. X is greater than 4. And that is choice G. 23. 23 says the perimeter of a parallelogram is 72 inches. Remember, we said earlier when we were talking about parallelograms that opposite sides were congruent. And we know perimeter is adding up all the sides. So we could call these x and y. And we could say 2x plus 2y equals the perimeter. But wait, as I read further, not only does it say that the perimeter is 72, but it says that one of the sides measures 12 inches. Well, if this is 12, then this is 12, and so I get 2x plus 2 times 12 equals 72. 2x plus 24 equals 72. 2x equals 48, and so x equals 24. You may be saying, well, Mr. Google, what if I plugged in the 12 for x instead of y? Sure, 2x plus 2y equals 72. And you say, this is the side that's 12. Well, we have two of those, and that's 24 plus 2y equals 72. We'll subtract 24 from both sides. Hey, this looks eerily familiar, and y equals 24. So we know the sides are 12 and 24. So the missing sides, if they gave us one side, the other side would be 12, and these would be 24 and 24. These are the missing sides. Okay, so that's going to be choice C. Choice C for number 23. 24. The lengths corresponding sides in two similar right triangles have a ratio of 2 to 5. So if this is 2, this is 5 in these similar right triangles. The hypotenuse of the smaller one is 5. What's the hypotenuse of the bigger one? Well, 2 to 5 equals hypotenuse to hypotenuse, 5 to h. So I get 2h equals 25, or h equals 25 over 2, which is 12.5. Therefore, choice K is my answer to number 24. Choice K for 24. 25. The sides of a square are 3 centimeters long. One vertex is at 3, 0. 3, 0. Well, I could go this way 3, and I could go this way 3. If I go this way 3, I'm going to add 3 to the x's, which will give me 6, 0. Oh, and that's choice A. So I guess I don't need to go back 3 to find 0, 0 is the other side of the other corner of the square. I found the one corner of the square, or vertex of the square, to be 6, 0, so I'm all done with 25. 26. Okay, in the circle, M is the center and lies on RU and ST. Which statement is not true? Well, this is asking us to remember a lot of our circle theorems from geometry. This is 50 degrees. This is R, S, M, T, U, and this is point X. Okay, so we've got this situation. Measure of angle TUM. TUM is 65. Well, how am I supposed to know that, you might say? Well, remember these are vertical angles, and vertical angles are congruent. And these are radii, so they're the same, which means these angles are the same. These 3 angles add up to 180. You've used 50, so you've got 130 left over for these two. 130 divided by 2 gives you 65 degrees. So this is 65, and this is 65, and that's the same over here as well. Okay? So we know that measure of angle TUM is 65. That was true. TU is parallel to RS. Well, this must be parallel to this because the alternate interior angles are congruent. And arc X TXU is 50 degrees. Well, we know that this is a central angle because the vertex is at the center. The angle and the arc have the same measurement in degrees, so 50 degree central angle means that arc TXU would also be 50 degrees. So it's not that one. RM and TM, well, RM and TM are both radii, so they have to be congruent. So we're left with choice K. Choice K is the one that is not always true. Not true. RS and SM. Well, RS is this leg, SM is this one. We know that these two are congruent because they're across from congruent angles and because they're both radii. But this one could only be the same length as this one if this were a 65 degree angle as well as this one. They're not the same angle, so they can't be the same side length, which is why choice K works for us in number 26. 27. John Jones has decided to go into business producing and selling boats. In order to begin the venture, he invests $10 million in a boat production plant. The cost to produce each boat will be $7,000, and the selling price will be $20,000. Okay, so it seems like if he's going to sell a boat for 20,000, but it costs him 7,000 to make it, every boat he makes, every boat that he sells, he's got $13,000 that can go off towards paying that $10 million investment that he made. So I think he's going to have to sell a lot of boats. Let's see. Rate of change, 13,000 times the number of boats minus the 10 million before he can break even. Oof, that's a lot of boats. But I noticed that this statement, which represents the profit, which of the following is his profit, he's going to have, in order to have any profit, this has to be a positive number, which means he has to sell a bunch of boats. And that's choice A for us. $13,000 per boat times the number of boats, so boats cancel and we're left with money, and then dollars minus dollars to get dollars of profit. How about 28? 2x squared plus 6x equals 36. A number of people had difficulty with this one. Remember, because this is a quadratic, we want to move everything onto one side of the equation and have this equation equal to 0. And we need to factor this. I guess we could use quadratic formula, but I see all the choices are really pretty friendly numbers. I will, though, say all of these numbers are divisible by 2. So if I divide everywhere by 2, I've got an easier polynomial to work with. This polynomial factors as x plus 6, x minus 3, and when we set each factor equal to 0, x plus 6 equals 0, gives me x equals negative 6, and x minus 3 equals 0. When I add 3 to both sides, gives me x equals 3. So negative 6 and positive 3 are my answers, and that's choice G. G for number 28. $29. Okay, we've got a table. We've got a cart's distance 5 different times. Which of the following represents the data? Okay, well, they've given us some some t values and some x values. 0, 10, 1, 14, 2, 18. Hey, these are all going up by 4, while these are going up by 1. Our rise over the run, or slope, is 4. And here's my y-intercept. And so the equation I would have would be x equals 4t plus 10. Now, we could also do this problem with ordered pairs. 0, 10, 1, 14. We could use the slope formula, 14 minus 10 over 1 minus 0, which gives us 4. And then we could go to y equals mx plus b and plug things in. But notice our input isn't x and our output isn't y. So instead of y equals mx plus b, I would write x equals mt plus b, right? Because our input is a time value and our output is a position. So if I plug in my slope of 4 and I plug in my y-intercept of 10, I would have x equals 4t plus 10. And that's choice C. Choice C for number 29. 30. To increase the mean of 4 numbers by 2, how much would the sum of 4 numbers be increased? Well, remember, we're going to take the sum and divide it by the number of numbers to get our mean. Now, if I want to make this thing, how many bigger was it? It was to increase the mean of four numbers by 2. Well, if I want this to go up by 2, and I know that there are 4 numbers, the sum would go up by how much? Well, they're asking me to solve this equation for sum. Well, let's multiply by 4. And the sum would have to go up by 2 times 4, or 8. The sum of those numbers would go up by 8. Great. So if I add 8 to the sum, that means the mean will go up by 2. And we can see that sum over 4 plus 8 over 4 is an equivalent expression. Sum over 4 is the mean. 8 over 4 is 2. And there we go. So we're going to add 8 to the sum if we want the mean to go up by 2. 31. 31. Meg pounded a stake into the ground. When she attached the leash to both the stake and her dog's collar, the dog could reach 9 feet from the stake in any direction. Using 3.14 for pi, approximate the area of the lawn in square feet that the dog could reach. Well, this is what the dog could reach with its 9-foot leash. And what we want to know is what's the area that the dog can reach. So that's going to be pi r squared, area formula for us, with a radius in our problem of 9. So 81 times pi. Now for pi, they said to use 3.14 in this problem. And because of that, I get choice D, 254. Note the word approximately. Approximately how much square area will the dog cover? The dog will cover approximately 254 square feet. So choice D is our answer to 31. Okay, let's take a look at 32. 32 talks about a television screen. I wonder if any of you still watch televisions. Television screens used to be measured on their diagonal. Recently changed from watching a 13-inch screen, it's smaller than the monitor on my computer, to one that was a 19-inch screen. And there's 19 inches. Okay. Boxcar appeared 8 inches long in the old screen. What would that be in the new screen? Well, we're going to use similar polygons here to say 13 is to 19 as 8 is to the boxcar length. And we'll cross multiply to solve. I get b equals 8 times 19 over 13. And that corresponds to, it will appear to be, to the nearest inch, 12 inches. It's not quite 12 inches, but it's the closest choice we have here is 12 inches for choice G. Choice G for 32. 33. In the figure below, ABCD is a square. Points are chosen to form 4 congruent right triangles. Each one has a leg twice as long as the other. Okay, what fraction of the area of the square is shaded? Well, let's see what we've got here. We know that this is x and this is 2x according to what they say in the second sentence. Each one has one leg twice as long as the other. So using the Pythagorean theorem, I can find this hypotenuse. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. So I get x squared plus 4x squared equals h squared. Well, 5x squared equals h squared. So I know that this is 5x squared. Okay. The square root of that, h, would be square root of 5 times x. Now, if I go back to the original square, where this was x, and this was 2x, and this was 2x, and this was x, and this was 2x, and this was x, and this was 2x, and this was x, the area of this big outside square, well, the side length is 2x plus 1x, or 3x. So the area of this would be 3x times 3x, or 9x squared. Now, what about the area of this square here? Well, this square has root 5x and root 5x as its sides, and so root 5x times root 5x is root 5 times root 5, which is 5, and x times x, which is 9x squared. The big outside square minus the little inside square, 9x squared minus 5x squared gives me 4x squared. Oh wait, they wanted the ratio of these areas. 5x squared to 9x squared. Cancel, cancel. 5 to 9. D is the answer for 33. 34. This is a law of cosines problem. Law of cosines is what we need to use when we've got an angle that is not a right angle and two sides. Now, I notice here that if I'm looking for this length, I need the law of cosines, but I also, when I read my choices, I can't use the Pythagorean theorem because this is bigger than 90 degrees. The formula for area of a triangle, well, they don't tell me the area of this triangle, so knowing the length, I can't solve it for the length of the pond rather. The ratios of the sides of a 30, 60, 90 and the 45, 45, 90 won't help me because this isn't one of those angles. This isn't 45, 45, 90 or 30, 60, 90. And so I'm left with law of cosines. Now, they don't ask me to use the law of cosines. They just asked me to identify that I needed the law of cosines here. Okay, let's move on to 35. 35. Which of the equations is graphed below? 2x plus y equals 4. Well, if I were to graph this from standard form, I would make a little t-chart and plug in a 0 for x and find out that y is equal to 4. And if I plugged in a 0 for y, 2x would equal 4, and so x would equal 2. So I've got these ordered pairs to plot, 0, 4, and 2, 0. So my line looks like this, and that seems to correspond to choice A. 36. The following figures in a plane separates into half planes. Okay, so this is a plane. And what cuts this in half? Well, it's not a line segment because a plane goes on forever, and a line segment doesn't, right? So I don't get two halves here. I get just, I can sneak around back. So I need something that also goes forever if I want to divide the plane into two equal pieces. And so instead of a segment or array, I'm going to go with line. A line will divide this into two half planes, and that's choice F. F for 36. Okay, 37. We want the diagonals of a hexagon. Well, let's just draw them. I mean, I could certainly teach you a formula for it, but teaching you the formula will take a lot longer than starting here. I can't put a diagonal here because they're already connected, but I could go here, here, and here. Notice in each case I drew 3 diagonals in, and in each case there should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines radiating out from a vertex. Right now, though, we've gone through 1 point. We'll say this is our starting point, and we've got 3 diagonals. So we'll go over here and draw in the 3 diagonals. 4, 5, 6. Now when we come over here, we've already got the diagonal here. So I just need to draw 7, 8. And then when I come here, I've got the diagonal to B and the diagonal to A, so I just need to draw this one for 9. This one has 3 added, this one has 3 added, so I'm all done with 9 diagonals, which is why D is the answer to 37. Okay, let's flip the page and look at 38. 38 says, in a standard xy coordinate plane, the center of the circle lies at x equals 4. And notice y equals 0. So 4, 0 is where the center lies. Well, we should know, ideally, that the equation for a circle is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared, where hk is the center and r is the radius. Well, I notice from the picture that the radius is 4. And the center we said was at 4, 0. So I'm putting in a 4 for h and a 0 for k. That's going to be x minus 4 squared plus y minus 0 squared equals 16. Or x minus 4 squared plus y squared equals 16. And that corresponds with choice G. Choice G for number 38. Okay, so 39 asks us in which order should we write 5/3, 7/4, 6/5, and 9/8. Well, the simplest way is to pull out our calculator and write the decimals for each of these. And when we do, we're going to find this one is smallest, and this one is largest. This one is second smallest, and this one is second largest. So our order is that of choice A. But really, this is easiest if we do it on our calculator. Otherwise, we have to make a common denominator here for all the fractions, which would be 120. Yes, 120. And I don't really want to take the time to make a common denominator for all the fractions. All right, I guess I will. Here I have to multiply by 40 over 40, so that's 200 over 120. And here I have to multiply by 30 over 30, that's 210 over 120. And here, in order to get 120, I have to multiply by 24. 24 times 6 is 144 over 120. And 8 times what is 120? 8 times 15 is 120. 9 times 15 is 135. So I can now put these in order from smallest to largest. This one is smallest, then this one, then this one, then this one. 9/8 is smallest, then 6/5, then no, 7/4 was largest. So yes, there it is, A. Choice A for 39. But really, I would do that on the calculator. Okay, 40. 40 gives us this formula, and I recommend reading the question, not getting scared by the words, and seeing that all they want me to do in this problem is plug some values in for h and w. They're not asking me to derive the formula. I barely have to understand the formula. An elliptical picture frame. This is the perimeter of an ellipse. An ellipse is also known as an oval. So if you wanted to cover this perimeter, you'd use this formula. But they tell us our height is 4. H equals 4 and an outside width of 3. So we know then to plug in 4 for h and 3 for w, so we get pi over 2 square root of 2 times 4 squared plus 3 squared. Well, 4 squared is 16 and 3 squared is 9. So that's pi over 2 times square root of 2 times 25. Hey, 25 is 5 times 5. So I can pull a 5 out times the pi over 2 that's already there and leave that root 2 alone. And so what am I going to be left with? Well, that's choice F, 5/2 pi root 2. Okay, 41. This is the formula for an ellipse. A over 30 plus b over 105 equals 7a plus 2b over x. Well, that's very interesting. That's not an ellipse formula after all. It's in fact just adding some fractions together. And if I'm going to add these fractions together, I'm going to need a common denominator. Well, this is 6 times 5, and this is 5 times 21. 21 is 7 times 3, and 6 is 2 times 3. So my common denominator needs a 5, needs a 3, needs a 2, needs a 7. My common denominator is going to be this. It's going to be 10 times 21, or 210. So what do I have to multiply the first fraction by to get a common denominator of 210? 7 over 7. And what am I going to have to multiply the second fraction by to get 210? I'm going to have to multiply 105 by 2 over 2. And so I end up then with 7a plus 2b over 210. Hey, that's x. X is 210. X is my common denominator. So that's why choice C is my answer for 41. 42. I'm supposed to use this table for every $1,000 borrowed, I have to pay back this amount of money. Let's look at the table. I have to pay back this amount of money for every $1,000 I borrow at 5% for 36 months. But if my loan goes for 48 months, then I pay this back every month. And if my loan goes for 60 months, then I pay this back every month. It appears as though my monthly payment is lower the more months I have. This is true, but I'm also going to be paying a lot more in interest by carrying the loan for 60 months instead of 36 months. So even though this is a smaller monthly payment, I'm paying much more for whatever it is that I'm buying than if I had bought it with fewer payments. So remember, while it's good to buy that car, and you'll need the smallest payments possible probably for your first car, my recommendation would be that you try and pay that car off as quickly as you can by getting the largest payments possible, or the shortest amount of payback time. Also try and get the cheapest loan, 5%. Our payments are much smaller than at 12%. Okay, so enough on that. Let's look at 42. 42 says, Kaylee found a used car. She's thinking about purchasing. The list price is $8,795. She calculates she'll need to borrow $6,500. Well, how many thousands is that? If I divide by 1,000, it's 6.5 thousandths. So she wants 36 months, see, just like I said, the shortest number, at 10%. That number is 3227 times the 6.5 packets of 1,000 that she needs to borrow, right? She's going to borrow $6,500. How many thousands is that? That's 6.5 thousand. For every 1,000 she's borrowing, and she's borrowing 6.5 of those thousands, she has to pay $32.27 a month. And that's why her payment will be $209.76 per month, or choice H for 42. 43. 43 says a local dealership is having an end-of-year clearance sale, 5% interest on all 36, 48, and 60 months. The maximum that Kaylee can budget for her monthly payment is $300. Well, so if she's got a limit on what she can purchase, how much her monthly payments can be, she probably wants the least monthly payment, and that's going to come from 60 months. So 60 months at 5% is $1,887. So if we've got $1,887, what's the max she can borrow and stay within budget? Well, we know that times the number of $1,000 packets she borrows has to be less than 300. If I divide both sides by 1,887, I get the number of $1,000 packets is 300 over 1,887. And I find out that this is more than 14 and less than 15. So I know the number of packets. Sorry, let me pull out a calculator for this one. Do I have a calculator? Well, when I did this before, I'm sorry, I don't have the decimal approximation for this division, but you can do that. I ended up with choice D, 15,000. The most she could get is 15 of these $1,000 packets, and so the most she could borrow is $15,000 to stay within her $300 a month payment budget needs. Okay. 44. 44 says 5-year loans, 5 years at 12 months per year is a 60 loan payment. So if we're talking about a 5-year loan, we're talking about a 60 monthly payment situation. With an annual of interest of 9%, okay, so 9%, oh, that's not on my table, it's somewhere between 8 and 10%, to estimate the payment per thousand. So, I noticed that 2124 is what we pay at 10%, and 2028 is what we pay at 8%. And if I average those two numbers, I want to average the 10% and the 8%. What would the average of those two be? I think this might be a good estimate for what we might end up paying at 9%. And when I do that, I get choice G, 2076, for number 44. 45. 45 says that there's a triangle with A, C is 34, this is 25, B is 41. And so we get a situation, ooh, how big is this? Well, we know 180, and we've used 75, so this must be 1 and 5 in here. Okay, so we're looking for the length BC. So what would help us find BC? Well, this isn't a right triangle, so it's either law of sines or law of cosines. And since I have an opposite side angle pair, this angle and this side across from it, I know I'm supposed to be using law of sines. So I could say that the sine of 105 over this unknown x should be the sine of 34 over 25. So if I multiply both sides by x, I get sine 105 equals x sine 34 over 25. Multiply both sides by 25. Divide both sides by sine of 34. And we get x is equal to this. And that's choice B. Choice B for number 45. 46. 46, we're asked to find 4 plus I squared. We know that I squared equals negative 1. Well, this is a foiling problem. 4 plus I times 4 plus I. 4 times 4 is 16. 4 times I is 4I. 4 times I is 4I. And I times I is I squared. So I get 16 plus 8I plus I squared. Well, they reminded me that I squared was negative 1. So 16 plus 8I plus negative 1 is 15 plus 8I. 15 plus 8I corresponds to choice J. Choice J for number 46. 47. 47, R and S can be integers where S is greater than 10, and 2R plus S equals 15. Well, I know that S is a number bigger than 10. So if this were, say, 11, and I subtracted 11 from both sides, I'd end up with 4 over here. And so 2R would be 4, and so R would be 2. Now, if I put in an S value bigger than 10, but bigger now than 11, like 12, I put a 12 in here and subtract 12 from both sides, I get 2R equals 3, or R equals 1.5. And if I put a 13 in here for S and subtract 13, I get 2R equals 2, or R equals 1. I notice these R values are getting smaller and smaller the larger the S value is that I plug in. So I think R has to be less than or equal to 2, and that's choice E. 48. Which of the following has a positive value for x and y given that x is greater than 0 and y is less than 0? So we know x is positive and y is negative, but we want the result of whatever we're doing with x and y to be positive. Well, if I take a negative number and subtract a positive number, like negative 3 minus 2, that's negative 5, that's not positive. If I take a positive number, like 2, and add a negative number, like negative 5, I get negative 3. That's not positive, so choice G doesn't work. What about cubing the positive number and multiplying it by the negative number? So we've got 2 to the third times negative 3. That's 8 times negative 3. No, that's negative 24. And choice J doesn't work. When I look at choice K, a positive number over a negative number squared, that squaring will turn that negative into positive 9. And finally, I get a positive choice for K. 49. What's the value of log base 2 of 8? Well, I can rewrite this as log base 2 of 2 to the third, and then I can use the power rule to bring the 3 down in front. Log base 2 of 2, we should know is 1, and 3 times 1 is 3. So this is choice A. You know, you could always just type it into your calculator using the log base button under the math key. So press math and then scroll down to log base, and you could just type this in if you don't remember your log properties, or if in Algebra 2 your teacher hasn't quite covered them yet with you. Okay, that was number 49. Let's take a look at 50. 50 is another geometry question. We're given a right triangle with side lengths of 5 and 2, and we're asked for the tangent of B. Well, we know tangent is opposite over adjacent, so I have to find that missing side. And the way I find a side in a right triangle is the Pythagorean theorem. Question mark squared plus 2 squared equals 5 squared. Question mark squared plus 4 equals 25. Question mark squared is 21. And so when I take the square root of both sides, I see that it should be root 21. Therefore, the tangent opposite over adjacent should be root 21 over 2, and that corresponds with choice F. F for number 50. Only 10 problems left for us. 51. Okay, $50 per lesson, an additional fee to use the plane. Charge of use is directly proportional, so the use fee is proportional to the square root of the time the plane is in use. So if a lesson is 16 minutes, the usage is $90. So 90 equals k square root of 16. 90 equals k times 4. Divide by 4. K equals 2250. So then I know that u equals 2250 square root of t. But that's the usage fee. Don't forget the instructor is also charging for their time another $50. So our lesson that is 36 minutes long is going to be $50 for the lesson plus $22.50 times the square root of 36, or 50 plus $22.50 times 6, and that gives me D, $110. Oops, not 100, but $110. D for number 51. 52. 52 says we've got another triangle. C is on BD. The length of AD is 6. Sine of D is 0.8. Okay, so this is 6. This is the opposite side, also known as AC, the thing we're looking for. Oh, no, it isn't. And we know this is, yeah, I don't know that yet. I'm going to have to find that. And we know that this is angle D. Okay, we're looking for CD. But we know that the sine of little d is 0.8. And I know sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So if the sine of d should be opposite over hypotenuse, I can say that 0.8 is the opposite over 6. And when I multiply both sides by 6, I get that the opposite side should be 4.8. So this is 4.8. Now I'm looking for CD, and so I can use the Pythagorean theorem. Question mark squared plus 4.8 squared equals 6 squared. And that ends up being 3.6 for CD. You know, this is also uh, a 3, 4, 5 right triangle. This is 5 times 1.2 and 4 times 1.2. So this one would be 3 times 1.2 or 3.6. There's also a tricky way to figure this out, but this seemed like the fastest one to me if you didn't recognize the Pythagorean triple patterns. Okay, let's take a look at 53. 53 says absolute A plus B equals absolute A minus B. When is this true? Well, let's pick some numbers like A equals 2 and B equals 5. So absolute value of 2 plus 5, does that equal absolute value of 2 minus 5? No, because that's 7 equals 3 then. So A doesn't work. And what if the numbers are equal to each other? So if I make A equal to B, I've got A plus A and then A minus A. So that's 2A equals 0. That didn't work out so well. Oh, you know, unless A was equal to 0, what if both of these numbers are equal to 0? If both of the numbers are equal to 0, would it work? Well, we'd have 0 plus 0 equals 0 minus 0. Hey, 0 equals 0. That looks good. Only when A equals B and B equals 0. Well, that's the one we just talked about, where they both had to be 0. What happens if we make only one of them 0? Well, let's go back and take a look at making one of them 0. Let's say A equals 0. We would have 0 plus B equals 0 minus B. And this would be the absolute value of B. This would be the absolute value of negative B. Ooh, that's B equals B. And what about if we make B equal to 0? So I see that with B equal to 0, I end up with, I end up with absolute A equals absolute A, and which means A equals A, and so I like choice D for number 53. 54. 54. There's a lot of stuff in this picture. They tell me that L has a side length of X, and R has a width of Y. Okay, well, let's take a look then, because I'm not retrying this. We know that this is an X, this is an X, and this is a Y. Therefore, this would be a Y, and this would be a Y. This would be a Y, and this would be an X. So when I look at the total area of A, B, C, D, I'm looking at 1x and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 y's. So x plus 5y. And then going this way, I've got an x, and 1, 2, 3 y's. 2x plus 3 y's. So if I FOIL here, I get 2x squared plus 10xy plus 3xy plus 15y squared. Here's some like terms to combine. And that's choice K. Choice K for number 54. What about 55? Real number A, graph of the line y equals a plus 1, x plus 8, passes through 2, 6. 2, 6. So 6 goes here. A plus 1, 2 goes here. Okay, so I subtract 8 from both sides. I get negative 2 equals a plus 1 times 2. Divide both sides by 2. I get negative 1 equals a plus 1. Now, I could solve this equation for a, but they asked me what was, m was equal to, and m is a plus 1, right? Because we're looking at y equals mx plus b. So m is a plus 1. I just need to solve this equation for a plus 1, which I can do by subtracting 8 and then dividing by 2, and I see negative 1 is what m is equal to, and so that's choice C. Okay, problem 56. Says, there's a graph, this is height, this is time, baseball. So this is, baseball is hit from a certain height, goes up in the air, comes down and hits the ground after a certain amount of time. If you alter the equation C term, h equals at squared plus bt plus c. Well, this does what to our parabola? It's going to shift our parabola up if we change this number. So if I add 1 to this equation, my graph will be, all the y values will be 1 higher. So if I change c, that's going to affect a number of things, right? It's going to affect the y-intercept, it's going to affect the vertex, and it's going to affect the t-intercept when this thing hits the ground. And all of these values will be changed by changing our c, and so that's why K is the answer to 56. 57. Graph xy plane, the line x equals negative 3, and the line y equals x minus 3. Y equals x minus 3. We're supposed to be intersecting point. Well, we know the point of intersection has an x value of negative 3. So let's take that equation, x minus 3 equals y, and plug negative 3 in for x. And so we get negative 6 equals y. So the point of intersection would be negative 3, negative 6. And that corresponds with E. E for number 57. How about 58? 58 says angle A measures 50 degrees, and this is a pentagon. Okay. And what's the sum of these other measures? Well, I need to know how many degrees are total inside of this pentagon, and I can do that by using the formula that I've probably learned and forgotten in geometry, or dividing this thing up into 3 triangles, which gives me 180 degrees, 180 degrees, 180 degrees, or 3 times 180 for 540 degrees total. Well, if I use 50 degrees over here, that's 490 degrees left over for the other 4, and that's why K is my answer for 58. Okay, last 2 problems. 59. 59 says such that the product of C and 3 is B, which of the following represents the sum of C and 3 in terms of B? Well, if this is what B equals, what does C equal? I divide by 3, and I get C is B over 3. So I can then replace C with B over 3, and that's choice E. Choice E for number 59. And then our last problem, 60, 3-lap race, where the radius of the course is R. Okay, and we're running around must be a circle. Oh yes, the course is a circle. So we know that 2 pi r is the circumference of the circle. That's 1 lap of the circle. And our radius is big R. But that's 1 lap, once around. How many times do we want to go around? We want to go 3 laps. So 3 times 2 is going to give me 6 pi big R. And 6 pi big R is choice K. All right, these are the answers to all the questions in the packet. I look forward to seeing your presentations.